That was a pretty weak clap. Maybe let's clap again. That was also pretty bad. We've all had that moment. Someone's parents or maybe even your best friend swings by CVS before tonight's shenanigans, picks up a disposable camera, and now you're ripping through photos that will somehow define a handful of your most treasured memories. As a kid that grew up in the early 2000s, right on the cusp of the digital takeover, these drugstore disposable cameras were all the rage and still hold a nostalgic value today. But now that film photography is experiencing a definitive revival, is there something better? Welcome back, kids, to another episode of William Pretends He Knows How to Photography. I know it's been a little quiet on here the last couple weeks, but you got me talking again, so you can only blame yourselves. It's true that over the years, these easy access cameras were not only budget friendly, but a gateway drug to getting into the hobby at all. And why are these cameras so popular? The lens isn't exactly something to lust over. The weird exposure count of 27 to 28 frames isn't always ideal. And when you finish the roll, the camera is basically trash. They literally break it open like a chest burster to extract your images. Side note, does anyone else remember that slapdown technique where you would charge the flash and for some reason fire it off accidentally without taking a picture? I don't want to brag, but this is how you let the chicks know that you had Riz. Or in today's terms, this practice was basically as cool as the dudes that snap their fingers together, and no one likes those guys, not even their parents. But the point of these toy-like cameras wasn't to master all four elements and become the avatar of photography, but an easy-to-use, thoughtless tool that was expendable as the moment you were trying to capture. Very early on in my relationship with Christy, we invested on one of these silly cameras just on a whim, only because it felt like such a novelty and kind of a waste of money. I mean, it was 2019, it sounded pretty dumb, but it perfectly summed up that time in our lives. We spent the next 9 to 12 months slowly working through that one roll, only taking 1 or 2 exposures whenever we were out and about a certain adventure. And to this day, those are some of my most cherished memories that I have of our entire relationship. Not because I think they're good, but because they were just so much fun to capture. And that's really what these cameras do best. They're just a lot of fun to use. Absolutely no thought, just fun. But you know what's not fun? The price. The cost of these cameras now and the swing in scanning and developing costs is absolutely insane compared to the old CVS days of yesteryear. But to be fair, that process was always a nightmare. And if you're still going to a CVS, please stop it. Stop it right now. So the question is it still worth it to use these cameras in a 2024 economy? That's what I want to find out today. A large portion of the market today has actually been flooded with similar easy-to-use plastic cameras. Both Target and Walmart have their own version. Kodak has the M35 and the half-frame camera, along with many other companies. The best thing that these cameras offer is not only a similar look to a disposable camera, but reusability. You can actually take out the roll of film without destroying the camera and put a new roll of film in whenever you want to start up again. You don't have to go out and buy a new disposable camera every single time. You want to capture some vibrant moments at the beach? Put in some Ultramax. You want to capture the mood of a dark punk bar? Put some black and white in. Now you're not held to just what they preloaded the camera with, you can do whatever you want. The options are really endless when you don't have to throw away your camera every single time you end a roll. And as much as I'm hating on this lens, there is a nostalgic comfort that people have when it comes to the way this lens interprets light. People have gone so far as to make DIY and even Etsy shops that hijack lens caps of digital cameras where they'll insert this small plastic lens and use it on their camera. People are taking $5,000 cameras and putting a 30-cent lens on it. That's nasty. And honestly, I kind of love it. It perfectly aligns with what this channel's all about. But if you are interested in film and looking for that slight upgrade, I know these companies have already targeted you and maybe even sparked your interest. But before you click add to cart, let's just test it out a little bit. Back in October, Christy and I found our cute little emo hearts back on the 15 highway. Yeah, I know, I went to Vegas a lot last year. But when we planned on attending the 2023 When We Were Young festival, we both thought it would be the perfect experience to bring a smaller camera like this to try out its reliability. So for this experiment, I'd be shooting with the Rito Project Ultra Wide, while Christy brought along her Kodak M35. I thought the use of both these cameras would fill the void of a typical disposable look. The M35 having a similar focal length and onboard flash, while the Rito has that pocketability and sleek thin design for easy to access and low weight. You know, honestly, now that I have these cameras side by side, the Rito is actually a little smaller than most disposable cameras. Seriously, this camera is lighter than my wallet with a roll of film inside of it. And that's not a flex. I was broke as f***. stock after this trip. I also brought along my Yashica T2 for the remainder of the trip as a stand-in for a generic point and shoot you might be able to stumble across in your local thrift store today, to compare our findings against these more popular and cheaper cameras. The night before we drove out, I had my Instagram community vote on what film I should bring into the event, and you guys mostly voted for Ultramax. Christy laced up her docs. Oh, and she painted my nails black, you know, for science.
Yeah, exactly.
While we watched the first Final Destination. Come on, people, get into character. The next morning, our eyeliner was melting before we even stepped outside. I know it's still kind of winter time right now, but back in October, Nevada might as well have been the boiling point of all existence. And we kind of started to question what we were doing there at all. But as we started to follow other like-minded idiots lost in the desert and pulled out our respected instruments for the day, we remembered the plot and the journey we had just embarked on. We just had to get through that line first. There's a lot of vignetting going on with this lens. At some point or another, I made an effort to not try and capture the event, but more try to focus on the people there and moments happening. Some of these shots on the Rito are a bit shaky, and I'm not exactly sure if that's the high aperture this camera operates at, or if the camera is so light that the slightest bit of handshake when you press down the shutter will actually give your images more movement than you had intended. Side note, this lens is 22 millimeters, and according to the internet, a lot of people accidentally get their fingers slightly in the shot of the lens, so don't do that. I actually didn't have that issue here, but I did pull a rookie move and caught the camera strap making a cameo. Christie's M35 had much more consistent control when it came to the shakiness, but I gotta admit, the 22mm on the Rito was a look I actually really enjoyed for this environment, even with the cheap nature of the lens. Like, there was this lens flare I got from the sun that day that weirdly works. It perfectly framed this cameraman, maybe a little too New Testament for my normal work, but I think for this day it actually fits nicely. But I'm sure that this lens flare happens at any point if you turn towards the sun too closely. As we neared the end of our rolls and the sun started to go down...
How happy are you that the sun went down?
I'm quite happy. I feel spoiled that it went down before we played.
We both realized that we were in fact not young anymore, which was a terrifying thought. But nothing was quite as terrifying as that Vegas sphere face staring into our souls. Seriously, why is this a thing? After Blink told their 87th dick joke and blew up the entire main stage with fireworks, we called it a night and had our feet surgically removed. I have never been surrounded by so many strangers in my life. Let's just say we didn't watch any scary movies that night. We just passed out the moment our keys opened the hotel door. The next morning, maybe it was already noon. I really don't know. I loaded up the Yashica T2 with some Ultramax and we headed down to Fremont Street. In all honesty, there was a bit more gambling and drinking when it came to this location, but we were so tired, nothing really felt creative in that moment. Not to mention the weightlessness of our ankles and the stretching of sunburns just might have contributed a bit. But that wasn't something a little pizza recharge couldn't help. Christy brought me to an interactive art experience called Area 15 that was pretty amazing to see in person. A lot of these shots on the Yashica T2, maybe it's not a totally fair comparison up against these cheaper options, but I don't think either of the plastic cameras would have been able to capture or properly expose in these conditions, let alone a run-of-the-mill disposable camera. Inside was like an alien raver's dream. Whatever species that was all CG singing that they added to Return of the Jedi, she probably spent her college days here. It was a bit overstimulating. but also really cool. Not to mention anywhere with an arcade bar is always a great time. Before turning in, we continued our marathon of the Final Destination movies, and we set our checkout time as late as possible. On our last day, we quickly hit a few of my favorite spots before the journey back to LA. Red Rock Canyon, which unfortunately was closed to the public that day, and the abandoned hotel in Baker, where I polished off the last of the Ultramax. So now that we drove through 2 states, shot more than a few rolls, and lost way too much at the blackjack tables, are these cheaper plastic cameras worth it over a disposable camera? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe not. As much as I enjoy a lot of these shots we were able to produce, a traditional disposable camera just never really misses with that nostalgic look. And I don't think I've ever experienced any shakiness on those cameras like I did with the Rito. Honestly, I think the best bang for your buck if you want to take a step up from disposable cameras is to hit up your local thrift store, ask your parents, or just start drowning in eBay like I do, and find a pretty reasonably affordable point and shoot. Does this defeat the purpose of a plastic, easy to throw away item? I don't know, not really. Will a point and shoot with electronics in it die one day? Yeah, I guess. But I'm not talking about dropping your life savings on a Contax or whatever point and shoot your favorite celebrity is shooting these days, but a reasonable, mass-produced product like an early 2000s Olympus Epic or some other gem you might come across. The lens doesn't have to be amazing, it just has to work. Alex and I have accidentally found way too many of these family vacation style cameras over the last year, so you can't claim they aren't out there still for a good price. You just might have to dig a little further than the first thrift store you go to. Or maybe buy a Canon AE1, like an adult, and embark down the deep path we all found ourselves in. But if you do prefer to buy disposable only once a year and slowly work your way through that roll like Christy and I did, then sure, that's 100% the best choice for you. But I'm speaking to those that are looking for a little more. Maybe a lens that's actually not plastic. There's hope for you. It's out there if you look for it. We'll never be as young as we once were, but that doesn't mean we have to stay broken. We're holding really quick because my neighbors are so loud. And now there's a plane.